And welcome to our Legal Aid Queensland webinar. Today's webinar is on the Youth Legal Advice Hotline, a new service at Legal Aid. My name is Linda Richards. I'm the Community Legal Education Coordinator here at Legal Aid, and I'm joined today by David Law, who's our Principal Lawyer with the Youth Legal Aid team, and also with Senior Sergeant Glenn McNeil, who's here today, and he'll join us for our question and answer and add some input as needed. And Phil Hall is also here from Youth Justice. So welcome to our guests and to our presenters, and welcome to all of you. Thanks for taking the time out to come in to join this webinar this morning. So I'd also just like to remind you that this webinar is for community legal education purposes, and we are filming the webinar, so it will become a resource that can be used in your organisations, and it will be on YouTube as well. Before we go on, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we're broadcasting from today and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we continue. As I said, this webinar is being recorded and the information is available. The video recording will be available on our website on the Information for Community Workers and Carers page. Technical help is available on 1800 136 402 if you're having any trouble with the broadcast today. That's the number to call. Now, just a reminder also that you can download the PowerPoint presentation that David will be going through today. That will become the handout for today, and you can see the download tab on your screen there on the toolbar, and then you'll get the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation or throughout. What would you prefer, David?
What am I doing?
Throughout or at the end, the questions?
Oh, just do questions throughout. That's
okay.
Absolutely fine with me. All
right, and everybody will see their question box there on their toolbar. So usually we have about a 40-minute presentation, and then we have 20 minutes for questions, and our guests today will be available also for questions. So we've got a few polls throughout the presentation. This one's just to help us get an idea of who is our audience, who are our audience today. What area do you work in? So are you from South East Queensland, Far North Queensland, Regional Queensland, or outside of Queensland? I'll just open that poll now. Right, what area do you work in? I'll just launch that one. So the poll is open now, and we'll just take a few moments to respond, and then I can share those results with you. Okay, it looks like we've got 62% people from South East Queensland, 8% from Far North Queensland, and 29% from Regional Queensland. I'll just close that poll now, and I'll share those results with you. Okay, and we'll go back to our presentation. Okay. And we've just got another poll here. What is your work role? Is it police officer, youth worker, community health, education, or social worker, or other? It just helps us get an idea of who is in the audience today and how we can pitch the presentation. I'll just wait for another moment. It looks like we've got 36% of you are youth workers, 50% community health and education or social workers, and 14% other. Okay, I'll just close that poll now and share the results with you. And we'll move over onto our presentation. So I'll hand over to David Law, and he'll be taking you through the presentation today. Thank you, David.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Look, this is going to be probably not a particularly lengthy webinar today. We're just basically here to advertise this youth legal advice hotline that was established in November of last year. So we're just going to go through why we're doing a hotline, the purpose of it, how you can access it, and a little bit more detail about it, including the New South Wales experience, which is the only other jurisdiction that has one of these in place at the moment. Feel free to ask questions as you go, because the more interactive these things are, I think usually the better they work. At the moment, there's something called the Children's Committee, and the Children's Committee is a group of stakeholders within the youth justice system that meets once a month. It's chaired by His Honour Judge Shanahan, who's currently the President of the Children's Court, and the Deputy Chair of that meeting is Deputy Chief Magistrate O'Shea, who is the Children's Court Magistrate in Brisbane. It has representatives from Legal Aid and the Bar Association, Law Society, Education Queensland, Child Safety, Youth Justice, the DPP and police. The purpose also ATSLs attend that meeting also. And we talk about issues that are emerging in the youth justice system. One of the things that's been commented on is that for the last 4 years, Judge Shanahan, in his annual report for the Children's Court, has noted that the number of children that are being diverted away from the youth justice system has reduced. And what this means is that under the Youth Justice Act, police have got the option of not charging children with offences, but instead either cautioning them or putting them through another diversion option, such as a youth justice conference. And the Act requires police to consider those options before they charge a child. But the issue that we've faced with that diversion system is that before a police officer can divert or caution a child, the child pretty much has to make an admission to the offence, and that's where things fall down a little bit. So I'll go to the next page, and I'll just give you a bit of an idea of the extent of the problem. I don't think that don't look at that bar graph. I don't think that has any real meaning whatsoever. But if you just look at the numbers there, so last year was probably the smallest decrease we've had. So there was a 1.1 decrease on last year, then 6.4, 5.8, 13.3% decrease in diversions in 2012-13, and a 9.1% decrease. So even though that level of decrease in diversions is actually reducing, it's still a decrease. We're not seeing an increase in that. So everybody's sort of got together and started to talk about why maybe those diversions are reducing in the system. And look, there's a whole number of reasons why that has occurred, and we're not going to go into those here today. But one of the principal complaints from the police is that they really like to caution more often, and they like to send children to a youth justice conference. But sometimes when the child rings a lawyer or gets advice from mum or dad, the first thing that lawyers do instinctively is say, don't talk to the police, don't make any admissions. Now that, unfortunately, can be counterintuitive and can actually harm a child when you're dealing in the youth justice system. It might be good advice for adults, but it's not necessarily good advice for children. And what we've also found is that children, the current services that exist at the moment, they're not so much legal advice, but more information. So they're not staffed necessarily by lawyers. So all that can happen is that just basic information can be given to children. So what often happens if a child rings from a watch house asking whether they should speak to the police, they're told not to, and to speak to a lawyer who might be available in court the next morning about what to do from there. So these things have been identified as a roadblock for increased diversion. So in New South Wales, they've got one of these advice lines currently. Now they have a bit of different, they've got a different system down there where they've got something called, I think, the Young Offenders Act from recollection, and that's actually backed by legislation. So under that act, if a child gives something called a protected admission, which means that they can tell the police, they can admit to the police, that admission cannot be used against them if the police change their mind and decide to charge the child at a later time. So again, that's protected in legislation. The advice line was established as 24 hours. It's actually not a 24-hour line. It goes until about 10 or 11 o'clock each night, but over the weekend, from Friday evening through to Monday morning, I think, it's a 24-hour advice line. And basically the police need to call the line so they can access legal advice. And in fact, the need for police to call that line is made into some New South Wales case law, where the judiciary has criticised the police officer for not calling the line, so conducting an interview with a child before they have the chance to speak to a lawyer. So because there's lawyers available, and because of the vulnerability of children in the youth justice system, having lawyers available, the courts expect them to be utilised, and if they're not, then it can actually make any admissions inadmissible.
We can skip this one.
We can skip this one too. All right, so the hotline was established in mid-November 2017. We've received some funding from Youth Justice to assist us with that, and Legal Aid's also throwing in some resources as well. And that runs between 8 AM to 9 PM every day and 7 AM to 12 PM on Saturday. It was a decision not to continue after 9 PM because I think my personal view is that it's probably not a good idea to give kids legal advice after 9 PM at night, particularly if they're affected by drugs, alcohol, or they've been sniffing, for instance, or just the fact that they can be also very tired and may not be able to take in the information. And we also run a service on Saturday morning, and that gives some flexibility to police where, for instance, a kid's attending school and wants the kid to get some advice before they participate in a interview, we're available for those hours on Saturday morning also. So we're trying to be as flexible as possible with our hours within the constraints of the funding that we have. The number is a 1-800 number, and it's 1-800-LAQ-LAQ, which is 1-800-527-527. I'll go to the next one. What have I done there? There we go. Oh, another poll.
Might be another poll. Should we run this one?
Yeah, let's run this one.
Okay. How often do you help people who might need advice about bail, diversionary options, being charged with an offence, talking to the police and youth justice issues? So I'll just open that one now. And the options there are daily, weekly, monthly, or rarely. It's always just interesting to know what people's day-to-day experiences are, these issues. Okay, it looks like we'll close that poll now. And we'll share the results. It looks like we've got 29% daily, 29% weekly, 18% monthly, and 24% rarely. So I think we're definitely talking to the right audience here, people that are coming into contact with young people that need our services. So we'll continue on. I think I've already shown that. Right, yeah.
All right.
Back to you, David.
Okay. So what sort of advice do we provide online? Look, as a catch-all, it's anything to do with the youth justice system we'll have a chat to kids about. So they've been charged with an offence, they've been requested to attend a police interview, they want advice about bail, detention centre transfers, appeals, particularly those kids who are currently in detention centres, or they've just come into contact with police or have questions about youth justice issues, including interactions with youth justice services. So kids are on orders and they're having some difficulties communicating. We can sometimes come in and give us a bit of advice and assistance to children around those issues. So it's very, very broad. We're very keen to have, well, actually, what's the next slide? Here we go. This is about diversions. So our rule in my team in Youth Legal Aid, we don't automatically tell a child not to participate in an interview. So all the lawyers who work in Youth Legal Aid, we solely represent children in the youth justice system. And currently within my team, we are duty lawyers in all Southeast Queensland courts at present. If police want to interview a child, we'll always make contact with the officer and talk about the possibility of the child being diverted. That's something that all of my lawyers are required to do. So it's just not a simple situation where we have a chat to the child and say, did the police mention anything about a caution or diversion? If they have, then off you go and participate in the interview. We want to actually have a chat to the police officer and have a chat to see what they're thinking about in terms of the child. Now, look, if that conversation with the police officers positive, that a diversion is on the table, we'll have a talk to the child again and say, look, the police officer's thinking about diverting you, depending on admissions usually. And if the child says that they're guilty of the offence, obviously we don't want children to be diverted if they're not guilty of the offence. That's a different conversation. We'll recommend to the child that they might want to participate in the interview. And we put some necessary caveats around that. So when we talk to the police officer, we'll say, look, if there is a diversion, the child is participating in the interview for the purposes of a diversion. And that protects the child. So if for some reason the view changes of the police and they want to charge, then there is a note that was told to the police officer at the time. Our experience with the police is that having that conversation around diversion and the child always creates a good outcome for the child when there's diversion on the table. We've never had a police officer go back on their word. It's been a very positive experience from our point of view, and we've also got good feedback from the CPIU officers that we talk to about this also. The advice we give is confidential, so we don't pass on the names of the children to Youth Justice, for instance, or any other government department in terms of you know, when they called and what sort of advice was given. That was all completely confidential. And if admissions are made to facilitated diversion, we take a note of that on our advice. And if something changes, we say to the child or their carer, look, if the police then do charge you, give us a call and we can assist from there. Now, I've said here police have undertaken to treat any admissions made as protected admissions. That's not correct at this stage. We're still talking to the police at the moment about a way of having those admissions considered protected admissions. But can I say that in dealing with the police around this issue, there are no issues with this whatsoever. Police do basically, if they say that they're going to caution a child or issue a youth justice conference, then that's what they do. And hopefully we'll get some more, as the chats continue with the police, hopefully we'll get a little bit more structure around this in due course. But at the moment, if you are a lawyer, if a lawyer from my service gives advice, we're very confident that the police will divert where appropriate, and if they've told us that they're going to divert. So this is our experience so far. So here's the bit of the negative stuff. It's been really, really poor. We have got very, very few calls at this stage. Yesterday was a boon. We had a number of calls with 2 lawyers at the same time giving advice. But that's to be expected. So in talking to people in New South Wales who established this line, it really does take 18 months to 2 years for the line to really become part of, I suppose, the toolbox of people working in the youth justice system, and also for police to start using or referring kids to the line or handing out the cards to kids to get some advice before matters are proceeded with. So we're not, we're disappointed, but it is expected at this stage. And a lot of the calls we get at this stage are actually not from children as well. It's actually other people taking advantage of an after-hours line. But again, after 18 months to 2 years, that will settle down. Part of the purpose of doing this webinar today is to get the word out so that you know this number exists, so that if you've got kids with any questions, they can get confidential advice. We also help kids with arranging representation. So if a child's just been charged and the parents don't know what to do, the child doesn't know what to do, we can help arrange a lawyer for that child. And that's what we did a lot yesterday. we arranged lawyers for about 4 children who've just recently been charged, and we managed to do that within 2 hours. They have a lawyer to speak to. So that's worked really well. And that reduces, obviously, the stress on the child and on their parents in particular, usually when they call, and helps the system work a little bit better so that if they have a lawyer early, then there can be an early resolution to the matter. Also, negotiations with the police can occur. If the matter's to resolve to a plead guilty, that can occur at the first court date. This is where all of our officers are, just as a way of a bit of information. The hotline at the moment, all the lawyers are based in the Brisbane office, just next door to here at 30 Herschel Street. And we've got a little pod set up with phone lines. That will be extended to youth lawyers that are currently based in Cairns, Townsville and Rockhampton. They will also be attending to the line in due course once I train them up, because it's a very new process that we're going through at the moment. But we do give advice to kids all around the state. So we're particularly interested in kids from remote and regional Queensland, children particularly from the Cape and the Gulf who may have difficulties accessing a lawyer. They're more than welcome to give us a call on that 1800 number. We represent Indigenous children and know how to communicate with Indigenous children appropriately. So we encourage them to call if they can't access a lawyer any other way, or if they just want to give us a call, that's absolutely fine with them as well, with us as well. Those are just the general numbers. We've got an Indigenous information line too, so if they call, if they can't remember the 1800 number, they can call the 1300 number and get put through to us also. So, are there any questions that anybody has about this line? We've got Senior Sergeant McNeil here and Phil Hall from Youth Justice. I should say that this process is supported by the Commissioner of Police, the Youth Advice Line. It's supported by the senior CPIU officers in Brisbane, and also by Youth Justice and Legal Aid Queensland also.
At the moment, we can't see any questions coming in, but this is the time to email those questions in. I just wondered, David, if you wanted to show people the cards and posters that hopefully are appearing around.
There's the card.
Agencies and police stations.
Now, if you'd like any of these sent to your organisation, just contact our office to speak to our comms team, and they'll be able to get you these. So these are the wallet cards, and on the back, a bit of advice, and then these are the posters here that we can send to you that you can put up.
Okay.
All right.
You can see that there, David. There's one question here, just clarifying the hours of the hotline again. Yep.
Look, the service won't be 24 hours at this stage, and look, I'm not supportive of the 24-hour service for the reasons I gave earlier. I don't think we should be giving legal advice to kids when they're tired or affected by substances. We can just hold off. We're at 8 o'clock the next morning, so that's a good time to maybe speak to us. And quite frankly, and when you can talk about this if you want, is that there is no CPIU officer or police officer in this state who are going to caution a kid that late at night.
No, it's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Yeah.
So that's why we can just put off the legal advice to later in the day or the next day. And we've also got that service on Saturday morning. So sometimes police want to schedule after school hours, and we're available even at the police station. So if you're a police officer, you know, before they go into the interview, they can just give us a quick call and we can have a quick chat to you.
Okay, we've got another question here from Nicole. I'll read that out. If a young Indigenous person calls for advice, do they get referred on to ASLs, or is there a possibility of talking directly to Youth Legal Aid?
It's really up to the child. The child gets to really choose who their lawyer is. If they want advice from us, we will give them advice. We'll ask the Indigenous children, say, look, we're not ASLs, do you want to speak to ASLs? And if they want to be referred to ASLs, we'll certainly do that. But they're more than welcome to have advice from us, and they're more than welcome to have legal aid. And one of my lawyers or one of the our preferred suppliers look after them from there. That's completely fine.
Dave, can I just jump in about the previous question? 24 hours and just the nature and scope of the service. We're sort of working on a monitoring and evaluation plan. At this stage, the service is funded to the end of June this year, and decisions will have to be made close to that point about extending it. And we'll try to answer as many questions as we can in the short time that we've got between now and then about how the service is going, you know, what we think it's achieved, both in terms of securing more diversions and also other benefits that it might be delivering. And you know, David's talked about some of those, early contact with a lawyer rather than waiting till the first court date and so on. So we'll try to, you know, quantify as many of those things as we can. Other questions like, are the hours the right hours for the service? We'll also try to have a look at that, and you know, the service can evolve. Probably not going to expect much change between now and the end of June, but if it does get extended and the funding gets extended, then those sorts of questions we'll look at answering then.
Great. Thanks, Phil, for adding that. During that time, we've had a few more questions come in. Do you want me to read that out? David, is that a bit easier? Or
so there's basically a question about whether police will be encouraged to give a young person the contact, encourage them, the young person to contact the advice line prior to them moving from a rural watch house to a bigger centre to appear in court the following day? Or will the young person be put on the phone when they reach the larger watch house? Glenn?
I think largely, look, our police are being encouraged, it's currently the way it is now, to use the hotline. All the posters, as you saw earlier, have all been sent out to all the police stations. They've all got the little cards. So they'll be encouraged to use the hotline. It just depends in the circumstances of whether it's before or after. And I can't say a blanket yes, it will be before, yes, but it's just going to depend on the circumstances. But the police are being encouraged to use the hotline when it's appropriate.
thanks, Glenn. There's a question here from Ethan about the process and the involvement from parents. Dealing with children, do they have to have their parents present while seeking advice from Youth Legal Aid? Once they are referred or helped through the first stages, what's the follow-up process that Youth Legal Aid offers?
No, they don't need their parent. In fact, before we speak to a parent, we have to get the authority from the child themselves. The child is the client, as far as we're concerned. Having the parent involved is usually a good idea, but some kids don't want their parents involved. So, no, that is the answer to that question. Once they're referred, what's the follow-up process that you offer them? Well, it really depends on what's happened. So if they're simply going to be diverted by the police, that's basically the end of it. If the police are thinking about a conference, then the child would certainly apply for a grant of aid to have a lawyer at the conference. I usually only encourage kids to do that if there's something contentious about the conference, just so that we can ease it through. But I think sometimes having a lawyer sitting there with a child and a victim can sometimes be counterproductive to a conference. That's just my personal view at times. Having a support person for the child is different to maybe having a barrister like myself sitting there in a conference. If they're going to be charged with an offence, then we follow through with sending out legal aid applications and helping them access a lawyer. And so, as I said yesterday, in a number of those calls, we had lawyers appointed to children within hours of them calling the line, so that they could actually speak to their lawyer who's going to run their case all the way through straight away, which is helps reduce the stress for them.
The only thing I'll say for police is that we can't interview a child without a support person there. And in most cases, unless there's a lawyer there, that will probably be the parents, unless the child is able to nominate another suitable person to be a support person. So even though they've spoken to the lawyer, there may be a parent present when they're being interviewed and subsequently cautioned, or whatever option we've got.
There's another question from Amanda about peak times for arrests, in her experience being Friday and Saturday evenings after 9. Just addressing again the hours, will there be future considerations on extending the operational hours on the weekends? Or
look, all options will be considered. I'll tell you my personal view is that no, I think that's a terrible idea. I don't think we should be giving advice to children after hours because of those exact reasons. There's not much a lawyer can do if a child is arrested at 1 a.m. in the morning. There's not much a lawyer can do about that. They're not going to be, the police aren't going to caution them or put them through a system. There's nothing we can do to assist with bail at that time. But police have processes in place where they contact child safety after hours, or they'll contact ATSOS to let them know that the child there. They obviously talk to the parents and let them know where the child is. But in terms of actually what a role a lawyer can play after 9 p.m. on a Saturday night, it's pretty minimal in the scheme of things. So that's why I can't see that there's much purpose for us being available after that time. There's certainly an argument for other services to be available after 9 o'clock, but certainly I don't know what lawyers can do. We're certainly not social workers. There's nothing we can do about accessing accommodation for children. We are lawyers at the end of the day, and we're there to help with a legal problem. But that's something that will be considered, but that's firmly my view at the moment.
Thanks, Joe. There's a question here from Hannah about young people in detention. So if a young person already has a solicitor but is having trouble getting hold of them for advice, can they use this service? That's the first question. And then she's referring specifically here to young people in detention.
Yes, they can call us. They're more than welcome to call us if they're having some troubles contacting their solicitor. And what we can do in those situations is we can actually give the solicitor a call for them and say, hey, listen, they've called the line, they've got some questions, and we can follow up with them from there. Now, we may not be able to answer their specific questions for them because we're obviously not their lawyer and we don't know what the case plan is that their solicitor might have for that child. So we're not going to get too involved and stick our nose in. But it's certainly something where we can liaise with the lawyer involved and say, hey, listen, they've called the service, here's the questions they have. And then we can let the child know in the detention centre that we've passed on those concerns, and that if they still haven't got any answers, to give us a call back again. And we can talk about some what to do from there. So they're more than welcome to contact us. Their first port of call for those kids who already have a solicitor is their solicitor. But for instance, if they've got any questions about transferring out of the detention centre or, for instance, then really they should call us, because a grant of aid, their ordinary solicitor would be able to assist them with that. So those sort of administrative things that happen within detention centres and with youth justice, we should probably be the first port of call from there, and then we'll make a judgment call to let the lawyer know about the child's question.
Great, thanks, Joe. And there's also just a question here, just I think you made a point about confidentiality, but if young people can young people call the line directly themselves?
Yes, they can.
Yeah. And then just around the confidentiality around parents or other guardians or caregivers? We
don't let anybody know if a child has called the line. There are some really basic stats that we give. Say a child called and they were diverted, for instance, or a child called and we assisted them with their legal advice, and generally, you know, they were from far north Queensland, and that's what we did. And there's a few other little bits of de-identifying information that we give for an evaluation process, but certainly never the name of the child or the nature of it. Anything that could actually identify a child is certainly never given to anybody. It is confidential. In fact, our Act requires that, and if there is a breach, it's actually a criminal offence under our Act, besides all the ethical duties we have as lawyers, either as a solicitor or a barrister.
And David and Glenn, if there's a particular message we've got a lot of youth service providers online today, so what's a key message, I guess, for those youth service providers that are a key referral point for young people who might be needing the service? What sort of help, I guess, are we looking for in terms of promoting and getting the word out there?
Look, if in doubt, if you have a kid who has come into contact with police and has questions, call the line. It is not a restricted service. There's a question here about how many times the kids are allowed to call the line. It's completely free. They can call it as many times as they want. In fact, we've had one particular child that's up to their 6th call to us because we're managing the whole situation for them that's become quite complex. They haven't been charged yet, and we're just basically liaising with the police They are going to be charged, but we're liaising with the police officer, and it's worked out really, really well for everybody involved. In terms of getting the wallet card posters, if you contact Legal Aid and speak to the comms team, there might even be a button on our website, is there?
On our Legal Aid Queensland website, there's a tab around ordering our legal information publications. So I can send the link to you, or you can check out our website.
All right. Is there any other questions at all?
The only thing I'll say is, I noticed there's a number of things about what police will and won't do. From a police perspective, the hotline is probably one of the better things that have come out in the last few years. Our position is that any service which enables a child to make informed and a valid decision about what they're going to do is good for us, because it makes our life easier, and it means that the child makes a decision that is a good decision.
And we talk, Legal Aid and the police talk around this line in terms of how to promote it. So there's some particle across all the agencies here about this line. So if we can get the word out, I'd love to keep my lawyers really busy on this, if possible. I also staff the line, so I do at least 3 shifts a week on it. There's currently 11 specialist lawyers ready to take the calls if we just need them to call.
Great. Okay, so if there's no more questions, which I can't see any here, thank you all for tuning in today, and thank you for your questions and interest and your assistance in promoting this new service for young people. I'd like to thank our presenters and board for the presentation, and for our guests today, Sergeant Glenn McNeil and Phil Hall. Thank you very much. And also just to remind you that there will be a little pop-up survey that comes on after you close the webinar today. So we really value your feedback, and we run a number of different community legal education webinars. So please feel free to tune in to future webinars or spread the word. And David will be running another one in late February around the justice reform. So that's another one for particularly the people that have tuned in today. I'm sure you would be keen to hear more about what's happening in that space. And there'll be a debt one and consumer protection coming up on the 9th of February. And once again, all our video resources are available on our website, and legal information about what we do is there as well. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and thanks again to my guests. Have a good Tuesday. Thank you.